Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with a video I've seen going around on YouTube. I'm not quite sure who did it first. I think the idea actually came from Aina's Makeup Corner, but I first saw it on Laura's channel from Laura Force. I also know that Danny did it with a friend. I know Hailey has done it. I know a lot of people have done this video already, but I really wanted to take part of this video as well because I think it's a nice way of kind of looking into your own collection and reviewing some palettes, as well as yeah, just giving you an idea of what I think of my palettes in my collection. And if you don't know the video, I mean, it's in the title, but if you don't know what it is, it's basically randomizing 10 palettes in your collection and letting you know if I would repurchase them or if I would not. And yeah, that is the video idea for today. But before I jump into any of the palettes, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So I already have a wheel with all of my palettes in it from my product Level Up, which I use that for. And I'm going to go through and yeah, just pull those 10 palettes out and discuss them with you. So let's go ahead and pick the first one, and we're gonna get, see, this palette here, which is my gold palette from Anastasia Prism. Let's go ahead and do the second one. And that is Book of Magic. The third palette is gonna be the Gone Coconuts. The fourth palette is gonna be the Prism palette. That's 4. So the fifth palette is gonna be the Utopian Dream palette. Then we have the sixth palette, which is my Utopian Dream again. So let's go and randomize. Let's see. That is my Red Dragon palette. Then the next one is gonna be my Red Dragon palette again. I don't know why it keeps repeating now. Let's see what I get next. The Love palette from Anastasia Prism. That's 7, so let's do the 8th palette. And we get the Amrezy palette. Then the 9th palette is gonna be Love palette, which I've already gotten. My Mercury Retrograde palette, which is fine. And then we're gonna pull my very last palette, which is gonna be my Jackie Aina palette from Anastasia. So I'm going to pull those 10 palettes out and I will go through them in order. So I'm back with my palettes right here. I don't want to drop them, so I'm just going to hold them up briefly, but they are here in order. So let's go through each palette in the order that I pulled them in. So the first palette that I pulled in is my Anastasia Prism Gold palette, and I got this as a gift from my parents for Christmas. But this Christmas is going to be 2 years ago. This is what the palette looks like. It's an absolutely stunning palette. I'm not sure if this is discontinued or not. I think there was rumors that it was discontinued or disappeared from her website for everywhere. But I think I've seen it again on her website, and I'm not sure if it's back or not. But I think it might be discontinued, might not be, I'm not sure. However, if it's still available, this is a palette that I would 100% recommend. I love this. It's my favorite neutral palette in my collection. It is warm toned, so if you're not liking warm tones, maybe this wouldn't be the perfect palette for you. There is, however, a couple cool tones too, like these shades right here are more cool tone shades. So you can build slightly more like, oh, that's not cool tone, but more like neutral tone looks. So it's not just like super like warm tone. Like if you remove this yellow, like a super yellow in the middle there, it's not that warm toned. So it is a very nice neutral palette. I would 100% repurchase this again if I lost it, and if it's still available. I love this. I haven't used it as much as I wanted to, but you can see that I definitely have some dips in it already, and that's just like from using it, you know, organically. I did have this shade here in a project and I used it 15 times in that project, but overall I haven't really had it in any other projects where I want to hit panel or get usage goal on it. So this is just from like organic use, and I really love this palette, and again I would 100% repurchase this palette if I lost it and if it's still available. Another palette that is definitely discontinued though is my Book of Magic palette by Beauty Bay. This palette is one that I wanted not when it came out, but afterwards I felt like I really missed out on this palette, and I actually bought this off eBay for more than the retail price, but not too bad. I think I spent like £25 on it, which I think it retailed for £20 originally, so a little bit more, but not outrageously like a lot, you know, or maybe it was even £15 retail price. It's not very much retail price, but this is what the palette looks like on the inside. It's a really nice cool color story. There's a lot of shades in here that are very deep, which aren't my favorite, which is more kind of down here, and like, you know, some the black there, obviously the purple. I really like this purple though. It's a nice shade of purple. It does have some neutrals up here too, which is nice. It gives some variety to the palette, and overall this is not a palette that I would say is the most me, but I am happy to have it in my collection. Would I repurchase it though if I lost this? I don't think I would. Again, I'm happy I have it in my collection. I'm happy that I did pick it up because it was something that I really, really wanted, and I think it gives something additional to my collection. I don't think I have this color story anywhere else really. I mean, I have certain shades, like a few of these shades I have obviously in other palettes, but I don't have something like that is this color story exactly. So I'm happy that I have it, but if I lost it, I wouldn't go out of my way to repurchase it again, especially since it is discontinued and it would be quite hard to get hold of. And I probably would miss it a little bit, but I don't think I would miss it enough that I would want to repurchase it. So that is the second palette. The next palette is another neutral palette, and that one comes from Colourpop. This is the Going Coconuts palette. This is what this palette looks like. It's definitely more cool tone than the Natasha Denona one, and again, this is a very nice, I would say a bit more unique neutral palette in the sense of the tones in here. It's more like, it's cool tones, but they're not like necessarily grey leaning. They use like very nice tones of brown. Is this palette anything super unique, super special? No. Is it very convenient to have? Yes. Is it something that I can build really nice looks with? Yes. This is one of those palettes that I feel like wouldn't be super exciting to repurchase. It's a very boring palette, let's be honest. Again, it is something that is very nice to have in my collection, something that is very useful, and I'm on the fence if I would repurchase this because I do have so many neutral tone palettes, so if I feel like if I lost this I would have other things to use instead. But the tones of this are unique, so I think that after a certain amount of time I probably would want to repurchase it. However, I'm also not really repurchasing from Colourpop anymore, so you know what, I think I probably wouldn't repurchase this simply because it is a Colourpop palette. If it was something else I might have, but I just don't really buy from Colourpop anymore. I like their formulas, but I'm just so overwhelmed with all the releases, and you know, there's some things that have pulled me in recently, but I'm just a bit over their formula. I'm a bit over all of the things they are, you know, putting out. It's a bit repetitive, it's a bit, you know, they don't take a break basically, and I'm into more indie shadows and, you know, other brands now, so I think this would also be a pass. But it is a hard one because I do love the color story and I think it's a really nice palette to have, but if I'm being honest, I don't think I would repurchase this. Another palette that I would not repurchase, and I knew this straight away when I pulled this palette, is my Prism palette from Anastasia. This is another palette that I bought after it was discontinued. I bought it off eBay again. This was basically untouched when I got it. Maybe it had a tiny bit of use, but not much. But you can see now that I have used quite a lot of this palette. There are shades in here that are very nice, and this is another palette that I wanted for years. When it first came out, I feel like it was too colorful for what I liked back then, but since then I was really like, you know, there was this one palette I couldn't get out of my mind for years, and that's why I decided to pick it up. However, now when I have it, I don't think this is the best formula Anastasia has released at all. The shimmer formulas are very kind of thick and, you know, not in a nice way. They're just thick and hard to apply, especially like the more warm toned ones, so Pyramid, Eternal and Sphinx. They're all kind of that formula. I don't really like Throne, I don't like Osiris, they're too deep, and if I want something that deep for shimmer, I would go for one of my kind of multi-chrome shades instead, like one of the deeper multi-chromes, like the black based ones. There are some individual shades here that I do really like though. Like, I like Eden, I like Unity, and I like Lure. Those are really nice matte shades. Sphere is probably my favorite shade in this palette. It's a very unique shade and I really love this. It's almost like a neon yellowy green. It's beautiful. But if you look at this palette, apart from the color story I would say is pretty unique, but apart from that, each individual shade is not very unique. The other unique shade I would probably say I have in here is Dimension. It's another one that I don't really have in my collection anywhere else, but again, it's not a shade that I would reach for very often. So yeah, I definitely would not repurchase this, and it's definitely a palette that I am thinking about decluttering. Yeah, maybe this year or next year. So this is another one that I would not repurchase. The next palette that I have is my McGrath Utopian Dream palette. Again, this is a gift that I got from my boyfriend for my birthday last year. So I've had this in my collection almost a year now. This is a palette that it was something that I really coveted for a long time. I wanted something from McGrath for ages, and this is the one I asked for because it was her newest release, and it was like the first color story that really spoke to me. This is what it looks like. It's a beautiful palette. Holding this, I feel like I'm holding like a baby almost, because I'm being so gentle with it because I'm scared of dropping it. It's like feels really weighty, really like expensive, which is nice. When it comes to McGrath, I do want to try other palettes. I really want to pick up the Bronze Seduction palette, and I'm also really interested in the Divine Rose palette. So those are kind of the top ones I would pick up next, especially the Bronze Seduction palette. However, if I did lose this or it did break or something happened to it, I would repurchase this. I would. It is really nice. These special shades down here are beautiful, especially like these two obviously are the best ones. This one too is very nice. This one here is a multi-chrome. I don't know if you can pick that up on camera. Yeah, you can definitely pick that up there. You can see, oh, they're so nice. I do, however, though, have other multi-chromes in my collection, so you know, I don't think I would miss that specific shade very often or very much. The remaining shades are super nice too. The only thing that I'm a bit tired of those types of shades now, and that is this coral shade on here, because I was trying to plan a Bloom earlier this year, which is a very similar shade from the Sultry palette, and I'm just a bit tired of those shades. But apart from that, this is a beautiful palette and I would definitely repurchase. Moving on, we have my Odin's Eye and Judy collaboration. This is the Red Dragon palette. This is a palette that I picked up last year, end of last year, during the Black Friday sale. It looks like this on the inside. I do like this palette and I really wanted it because I feel like that this is a color story that is very me, and it is. I'm very, again, torn of whether I would repurchase this or not. Again, this is a multi-chrome. I don't think you can see the shift as strong as in the McGrath one, but it goes from like a pink to a green. This palette is beautiful. Again, it's very me. It has like greens, it has some neutral tones. I think the bottom like 3 shades I could take or leave, but overall this is a very me palette. But also because it is a very me palette, I do have these shades over and over in my collection. It is nice though to have this as like a whole palette, but this palette doesn't excite me as much as I thought it would. So since I'm being a bit more selective nowadays with what I bring into my collection, I don't think I would repurchase this again, because I have these shades out elsewhere, and these shimmers in here are absolutely stunning. However, I do have them in my indie shimmers, and the mattes I do also have in my collection. So yeah, just being like, you know, cutthroat, I would not repurchase this again. And again, this is discontinued, I believe, because it was a limited edition collab, so this is no longer available, and again, I would not repurchase this if I had the chance to today. Moving on to the next Anastasia Prism palette, we have the Love palette. This is another palette that I'm torn with because I haven't used it as much as I wanted to, but I think it's a unique palette in my collection. And I love the Anastasia formula or the palettes because you can depot the shades and use them as singles as well. This isn't my most favorite Anastasia palette, but I do think I would repurchase this again. Again, this is one that I got off eBay at a discount. This is a palette that I would repurchase in the sense of that I have shades in here that are more kind of unique when it comes to my singles collection and elsewhere in my collection. I don't have these looks of these pink tones and the red tones and the purples. Like, I think this gives something additional to my collection that I like having. Again, it's not my most favorite or most reachable color story, but since it does give something extra to my collection, I do think I would repurchase this. Maybe not straight away, but I think it would be something nice to have, and I'm very glad that I have it now, so I will put this in the repurchase pile. The next palette I have is another one that I got as a gift from my boyfriend. This I just got as a gift randomly, no occasion really, and he just wanted to do something nice for me, and he picked up the Amrezy palette from Anastasia for me. This palette looks like this, and it's a really nice palette. It has a lot of shades in here that are absolutely stunning. The shimmers specifically are so nice. I love the shade Barb. That's like one absolute favorite. I really love that one. And this palette is beautiful. I love having it. It's actually one that I did put on my shopping block because I don't reach for this as much as I want to, and there's a few shades in here that I don't, you know, like this half of the palette down here I don't really reach for very often. I mainly reach for like this half of the palette that I'm not covering. Also these two shades are basically the exact same, which is a bit excessive, and the pressed glitters aren't that great either. So there's parts of this palette that I, you know, could take or leave, but there's parts of this palette that I absolutely adore. So, you know, I think if I would get the chance to repurchase this today, I think there would be shades in here that I would miss. But the one I would miss the most is probably Barb, and although I don't have anything exactly the same in my India eyeshadows, I do have similar shades now, so I probably would reach for those instead. And take that away and, like, you know, the cupcake shade and, you know, this bright pink here, which I'm not too big of a fan of anyway, and then the blue here, which I have other shades I could replace it with. It is basically just a neutral palette, which I have tons and tons of in my collection. I feel like also this is very repetitive to some of the other Anastasia palettes. So I don't think that I would repurchase this if I got a chance today. I am very happy to have it in my collection though, and it is a palette that I do want to hold on to in my collection for now, and at least get those shades that I really love used up before I declutter it. The next palette that I have is a cult classic, and that is the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. This is always so difficult to open, but this is what this palette looks like on the inside. It's a beautiful, beautiful palette, especially like a spring and summer palette. I don't reach for this as much as I want to because it's more of a colorful palette, but I think this is so much fun. I've actually used this for 2 festivals, both this year and last year, the same festival, which is Transmit in Glasgow, so I have really good memories with this palette. I was thinking when I first pulled this in that I would probably do like a, you know, shock horror kind of decision and not repurchase this, but looking at it now, I think I would repurchase this if I lost it, because it's a really nice spring and summer eyeshadow palette, and it has like some mints, which I like. It has more kind of lilac-y pastels. You can make some neutral looks with it, and the shimmers are here are really nice. So I do think I would repurchase this, definitely. I think this palette inspires me. It's fun for special occasions like festivals, more kind of spring, you know, out there looks, and yeah, I would repurchase this if I got the chance again. It's probably not one of the ones that are the first one I would repurchase if I like lost all my palettes, but I think I would eventually repurchase this again because I do really like it. And yeah, it's a really, really well formulated palette as well. The formula in here is amazing, so I would repurchase this. Then the final palette that I have to talk about is my Anastasia Jackie Aina palette. This one looks like this. It's a really nice, again, unique color story. I think Jackie Aina did an amazing job on this palette. There is a few shades in here that I would, you know, again, could take or leave. I would, like, for example, like Lovelies and Shookington, I probably would not have those two in here. And maybe I would want like a slightly lighter transition shade or like a blending out shade. But I understand why it's not in there, because this was a palette created by, you know, a dark-skinned creator. And obviously she wanted a palette that could fit her skin tone, as well as like be very universal for deep skin tones, you know, medium skin tones and even light skin tones, which I do have, and it works really well for me as well. So I understand why they're not in here. I'm just saying, for me personally, this is not an absolutely perfect palette, but if I did lose this, I would repurchase it again, because the formula in here is probably one of the best that I've seen with Anastasia, and there are some shades in here that are absolutely like top notch. I would miss if I lost them. Specifically Sponsored, I love that shadow. That and Edges and Ginger, those 3 shadows here make an absolutely beautiful look. I do love Sam. It's one of the most glittery eyeshadows that I have. Like, not glitter and actual glitter, but just sparkly, beautiful eyeshadows that I have from like a mainstream brand. This one and Barb are very similar. They're very sparkly and texture, which I really love. You know, Supreme again gives a bit more pink in my collection, which I don't have too much of. And then, you know, some of the other shadows are really beautiful and stunning, and again a bit more unique. So it is another one that I would repurchase if I lost it, because I think it's a really nice, especially fall time palette, and I do love reaching for it. So those are the 10 palettes that I randomly picked, and I've actually done a 5-5 split. Here are the 5s that I would repurchase. Again, we have the Jackie Aina palette, we have the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette, then we have the Natasha Denona Love palette, we have the Pat McGrath Utopian Dream palette, and lastly the Natasha Denona Gold palette. Those, like, you know, again, these palettes are not necessarily something that I would purchase straight away. Again, the Love palette is one that I'm very on the fence about. They also one that I almost put in the not repurchase pile, because I think I love it, but I need to play around with it more to make a final decision. So, you know, this is like a maybe. If I had a maybe palette, this would go into it, and then I would have these four as like a definite repurchase. And then let's go through the ones that I would not repurchase. And then here we have the palettes that I would not repurchase. We have the Golden Coconuts palette from Colourpop. We have the Amrezy palette from Anastasia. Again, that is one that's like I'm on the fence about. We have the Red Dragon palette from Odin's Eye in collaboration with Beauty. We have the Anastasia Prism palette, and then lastly we have the Book of Magic palette from Beauty Bay. So those are the 10 palettes that I randomly picked. I do have, I think, 38 palettes in my collection, so this is only like about a fourth of my collection. But I really hope you liked getting an insight into my collection and the palettes that I've picked. And let me know if you've done this video as well, so I can go and check it out. I would love to see more of these, because I think it's really interesting to see what people think of their palettes and just give a bit of an, you know, insight into their collection. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye guys.